It's 12:15 a.m. It's February 6, 2022. So we'll continue reading about Exodus. We stopped in chapter 7, verse 21. So the verse 21 goes, "The fish in the river died and the Nile was contaminated so that the Egyptians would no longer drink the water of the Nile." So we're in Exodus already. So continue. "There was blood all over the country of Egypt. The Egyptian magicians, however, could do the same with their secret crafts. And Pharaoh remained unmoved as Yahweh had foretold. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron. Pharaoh returned to his house as if nothing of importance had happened, and yet all the Egyptians were digging near the Nile for water to drink because they could not drink from the river." The second plague, the frogs. 7 days passed after Yahweh had struck the Nile. Yahweh said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and tell him that Yahweh says, 'Let my people go to worship me.' If you refuse to let them leave, I will punish the country with a plague of frogs. The Nile will teem with frogs. They will invade your house, your bedroom and your bed, your servants and your people's houses, your ovens and your kneading bowls. Over you and your people, the frogs will climb." Chapter 8. Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, canals, and ponds of Egypt, and cause frogs to cover all the country of Egypt." The magicians of Egypt did the same by means of their secret formulas, and they brought frogs over the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Ask Yahweh to remove the frogs from me and my people, and I will send your people to sacrifice to Yahweh." But Moses replied, "Let me know, please, when I am to make the petition for you, your officials and your people, that you may be rid of frogs except in the Nile." Pharaoh answered, "Tomorrow." And Moses said, "Write, and that you may know that there is no one like Yahweh our God. The frogs will disappear from you and your house, your servants and your people. Only in the Nile will they remain." With this, Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh. Then Moses called on Yahweh concerning the frogs that he had inflicted on Pharaoh. Yahweh did as Moses had promised Pharaoh, and the frogs died in the houses, the farms, and the fields. The people piled them in heaps, and the land was filled with a foul smell. Now that relief had come, Pharaoh became even more stubborn and would not listen, just as Yahweh had foretold. The third plague, the mosquitoes. Yahweh said to Moses, "Tell Aaron to strike the dust of the earth with his staff and turn it into mosquitoes throughout the land." Aaron did this. He struck the dust of the earth, which turned into mosquitoes that tormented people and animals. All the dust of the earth all over Egypt turned into mosquitoes. But when the magicians tried, by means of their secret formulas, to drive away the mosquitoes, they were not able to do so, and the mosquitoes kept tormenting people and animals. The magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh was unmoved and did not listen, as Yahweh had foretold. The fourth plague, the horseflies. Yahweh said to Moses, "Rise early in the morning and go to Pharaoh. When he is on his way to the river, say to him, 'This is Yahweh's message, let my people go and worship me.' If you refuse to let them go, I will send horseflies on you, on your officials, and on your people and your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be filled with horseflies, and even the ground on which they are built. But on that day I will spare the land of Goshen, where my people are. No horseflies will be there, and by this you may know that I, Yahweh, am in the land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. By tomorrow this will have happened." Yahweh did this, and then swarms of horseflies invaded Pharaoh's house and the houses of all his people and devastated the whole country. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go and sacrifice to your God in this country." But Moses replied, "That would not be right. We offer to our God animals which are sacred. For the Egyptians, if we were to offer in their presence a sacrifice which offends the Egyptians, wouldn't they stone us? We must make a 3-day journey into the desert, and there we will sacrifice to Yahweh, our God, as he commands." Pharaoh replied, "I will let you go and sacrifice to your God in the desert, but on condition that you do not go far and pray to God for me." Moses said, "I am leaving you, and I will pray to Yahweh for you, and tomorrow the horseflies will leave you, your officials and your people, but do not continue to deceive us by refusing to let the people go to the desert." Moses left Pharaoh's house and prayed to Yahweh, who did as Moses had asked, and delivered Pharaoh, his officers, and people from the horseflies. Not one horsefly was left. But Pharaoh was relentless and refused to let the people go. The fifth plague, chapter 9, death of Egyptian livestock. Yahweh said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'This is the message of Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. Let my people go and offer sacrifice to me. If you refuse to let them go and hold them back any longer, the hand of Yahweh will bring a terrible plague on your horses, your donkeys, and your camels, on your cattle and your sheep. But Yahweh will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt. Nothing belonging to the people of Israel will die.' Yahweh then fixed a time and said, 'It will be done tomorrow.' Yahweh did this the following day. All the livestock belonging to the Egyptians died, but not one owned by the Israelites died. Pharaoh made inquiries and in fact found that none of the cattle belonging to the Israelites had died. But Pharaoh remained adamant and did not let the people go. The sixth plague, the boils. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, "Take 2 handfuls of ashes from the brick oven and let Moses throw it up in the air in front of Pharaoh's eyes. It will become fine dust all over Egypt and bring festering boils on people and animals." So they took ashes from the oven, and in the presence of Pharaoh, Moses threw it up in the air, and it brought festering boils on people and animals. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because they had boils like all the other Egyptians. But Yahweh made Pharaoh stubborn, and he did not listen to Moses and Aaron as Yahweh had foretold. The seventh plague, the hail. Yahweh said to Moses, "Rise early, present yourselves to Pharaoh, and say to him, 'This is the message of Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. Send my people away to worship me, because this time I will send the full force of my plagues against you, your ministers and your people, that you may know there is no one like me in the whole world. For had I wished, I could have raised my hand against you and your people, and with a similar pestilence wiped you from the face of the earth. But this is why I have let you live, that you may witness my power, and that my name may be celebrated throughout the earth. Are you still set against my people living the country? Tomorrow at this time I will send very heavy hail, such as has never been in Egypt from the day of its foundation. So now let all your livestock and all that you have in the fields take shelter, because when the hail falls on all that remains in the fields, whether people or animals, they will die." Those among Pharaoh's officials who believed Yahweh's word hurried to bring their slaves and cattle inside, but those who paid no attention to Yahweh's warning left their slaves and their cattle in the fields. And Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards heaven and let hail fall toward Egypt, and people and animals and all that grows in the field." Moses stretched out his staff towards heaven, and Yahweh sent thunder and hail. Lightning shook the earth, and Yahweh rained hail on the land of Egypt. Lightning flashed in the midst of the hail. It was very heavy hail, such as had never been known in all Egypt from the time it had first become a nation. Throughout Egypt, the hail struck everything in the fields, both people and animals. It beat down everything growing in the fields and felled every tree. But where the Israelites lived, there was no hail. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Now it is clear, I have sinned. Yahweh is in the right, I and my people are in the wrong. Beg Yahweh to stop the thunder and hail. I will let you Go, and no longer will you stay here. Moses said to him, as soon as I leave the town, I will lift my hands towards Yahweh. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, and you will know that the earth is Yahweh's. But as for you and your officials, I know that you don't yet fear Yahweh our God. The flax and the barley were ruined, as the barley was almost ripe and the flax was in flower. But the wheat and the spelt, which are late crops, were not destroyed. Moses left Pharaoh and went out of the city and raised his hands towards Yahweh. The thunder and hail ceased, and it stopped raining. Pharaoh, seeing that there was no rain and that the thunder and hail had ceased, sinned yet again. He and his ministers remained unyielding and would not let the Israelites go, just as Yahweh had foretold through Moses. Chapter 10. The eighth plague. The locusts. Yahweh said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have made him stubborn and his ministers as well, in order to show my signs among them, and that you may tell your grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and about the signs I worked among them, and that you may know that I am Yahweh. Moses went with Aaron and said to Pharaoh, this is the word of Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. How much longer will you refuse to submit to me? Let my people go and worship me. If you refuse to let my people go, I will bring locusts into your country, and they will completely cover the surface of the land. They will devour what was left after the hail, as well as every tree in the fields. They will fill your house and the houses of your ministers and all the houses in Egypt, something your fathers and their fathers before them have never seen from ancient times to this day. Having said this, Moses turned away and left Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh's ministers said to him, for how long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go and worship Yahweh their God. Don't you realize that Egypt is ruined? So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said, go, worship Yahweh your God, but exactly who are to go? Moses said, we shall go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our sheep and our cattle, for it is the great feast of Yahweh that we are to celebrate. Pharaoh said, may Yahweh help you if ever I let you go with your little ones. Oh no, it's clear you are bent on evil. No, only the men all over sacrifice to Yahweh, if that is what you want. And they were driven away from Pharaoh's presence. Yahweh said to Moses, stretch out your hand and bring locusts to the land of Egypt. Let them eat every plant in the land, everything that was left after the hail. So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt. All that day and night Yahweh brought an east wind over the land, and in the morning the east wind brought the locusts. They came and settled on the land in such quantities as had never been seen before, and they will never be seen again. They covered the sky of Egypt, and the earth was in darkness. They devoured all the vegetation in the land, and all the fruit of the trees left over the hail. Nothing green remained, neither tree nor plant of the field, in all the land of Egypt. Because of all this, Pharaoh hastened to summon Moses and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned against Yahweh your God and against you. Forgive my sin, I pray you, at least for once, and ask Yahweh your God for a final favor to rid me of this deadly plague. Moses left Pharaoh and interceded with Yahweh, who brought a very strong wind from the west that carried off the locusts and swept them into the Red Sea. Not one locust was left within the boundaries of Egypt. But Yahweh let Pharaoh be stubborn, and he would not allow the Israelites to leave. The ninth plague, the darkness. Yahweh said to Moses, stretch your hand towards heaven and let darkness descend on the land of Egypt, a darkness so dense that it can be felt. Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and instantly black darkness covered the land of Egypt for 3 days. They could not see each other, and they could not move about for 3 days. But where the sons of Israel lived, there was light. Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, go and worship Yahweh, you and your children with you. Leave only your flocks and herds behind. Moses said, are you going to give us animals for our sacrifices and burnt offerings? No, our cattle to the last hoof must also go with us, for it is from our livestock that we will choose the victims we will offer to Yahweh. Moreover, we shall not know which ones we must sacrifice until we arrive at that place. But Yahweh let Pharaoh be stubborn, and Pharaoh would not let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, "Get out of my sight, take care, never come before me again, for the day you go, you do, you will die." Moses said, "It is as you say, I shall never come before you again." The 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. Yahweh said, chapter 11. Yahweh said to Moses, "I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and Egypt. After that, he will send you away and even drive you away completely. Speak to the people and tell them that both men and women are to ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold." Yahweh disposed the Egyptians favorably towards the people. Moses, moreover, was regarded as a person of importance in Egypt, both by Pharaoh's ministers and by the people. Moses said, "This is Yahweh's message. About midnight I shall go through Egypt, and all the firstborn in Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who is heir to the throne, to the firstborn of the servant behind the wheel, and the firstborn of the animals. There will be great wailing throughout all Egypt, such as has never been before, and never will be again. But among the Israelites not a dog will howl for the death of either man or beast. This is that you may understand that Yahweh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these ministers of yours will come down to me and bow before me, saying, 'Go, you and all who follow you. After that I will leave.' And turning in anger, he left Pharaoh. Yahweh said to Moses, 'Pharaoh will not listen to you, and so the wonders that I do in Egypt will be multiplied.' Moses and Aaron had worked all these marvels in the presence of Pharaoh, but Yahweh had made Pharaoh obstinate, and he would not let the people of Israel leave his country. Chapter 12, the Passover. Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt and said, "This month is to be the beginning of all months, the first month of your year. Speak to the community of Israel and say to them, on the 10th day of this month, let each family take a lamb for each house. If the family is too small for a lamb, they must join with a neighbor, the nearest to the house, according to the number of persons, to what each one can eat. You will select a perfect lamb without blemish, a male born during the present year, taken from the sheep or goats. Then you will keep it until the 14th day of the month. On that evening, all the people will slaughter their lambs and take some of the blood to put on the doorposts and on top of the door frames of the houses where you eat. That night you will eat the flesh roasted at the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat the meat lightly cooked or boiled in water, but roasted entirely over the fire, the head, the legs, and the inner parts. Do not leave any of it until the morning. If any is left till morning, burn it in the fire. And this is how you will eat: with a belt round your waist, sandals on your feet, and a staff in your hand. You shall eat hastily, for it is a Passover in honor of Yahweh. On that night I shall go through Egypt and strike every firstborn in Egypt, men and animals. I will even bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I, Yahweh, the blood on your houses will be the sign that you are there. I will see the blood and pass over you, and you will escape the mortal plague when I struck Egypt. This is a day you are to remember and celebrate in honor of Yahweh. It is to be kept as a festival day for all generations forever. The Feast of the Unleavened Bread. For 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread. From the first day you are to remove all leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first to the 7th day will no longer live in Israel. On the first day there will be a sacred reunion, and another on the 7th. No work is to be done on these days except what is necessary in the preparation of food. Celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because on that day I brought your armies out of Egypt. Celebrate it in future generations as an everlasting ordinance. In the first month, from the 14th day in the evening to the 21st, you are to eat unleavened bread. For 7 days there will be no leaven in your houses. Anyone who eats what is leavened will be cut off from the community of Israel, whether foreigner or native born. Nothing leavened is to be eaten. Only unleavened bread is to be eaten. Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Select and take one animal for each family and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a twig of hyssop, dipped in its blood, and sprinkle the blood on the doorposts and the top of the door frame. From then and no one will go out of the door of the house before morning, because Yahweh will pass through to strike Egypt, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and the doorposts, he will pass over the door and not allow the destroyer to enter your houses and kill. You and your descendants shall observe these instructions as an everlasting ordinance. You will carry out this ceremony when you enter the land that Yahweh will give you, as he promised. And when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean? You will tell them, it is the sacrifice of the Passover for Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the Israelites and struck Egypt and spared our houses. When the people heard this, they bowed down and worshipped. Then they went away and did what Yahweh had ordered Moses and Aaron. Death of the firstborn. It happened that in the middle of the night, Yahweh struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh heir to the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all animals. Pharaoh, his officials, and all the Egyptians got up in the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was no house without a death. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron in the night and said, Get up and go from among my people, you and the people of Israel. Go and worship Yahweh as you have said. Take your sheep and your cattle as you told me, and go, provided that the blessing be for me as well. The Egyptians too pressed the people to leave the country in all haste, for they said, If they don't go, we are all going to die. So the Israelites carried away on their shoulders the dough which had not yet risen, and their kneading bowls. Wrapped in their cloaks, they did as Moses had instructed them, and borrowed from the Egyptians articles of gold and silver and clothes. Yahweh made the Egyptians agree to the requests of his people and gave them what they asked for. In this way they plundered the Egyptians. Israel departs. The Israelites left Ramesses for Succoth, about 600,000 of them on the march, counting the men only, and not the children. A great number of other people of all descriptions went with them, as well as sheep and cattle and droves. With the dough they had brought with them from Egypt, they made cakes of unleavened bread. It had not risen, for when they were driven from Egypt, they could not delay and had not even provided themselves food. The Israelites had been in Egypt for 430 years. It was at the end of these 430 years, to the very day that the armies of Yahweh left Egypt. This is the watch for Yahweh, who brought Israel out of Egypt. This night is for Yahweh, and all the Israelites are also keep vigil on this night, year after year for all time, ordinances for the Passover. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, These are the precepts for the celebration of the Passover. No foreigner is to eat it, except the slave who has been circumcised after having been bought. He may eat it, but not so the temporary resident of the hired worker. The lamb must be eaten inside the house, and nothing of it shall be taken outside. Do not break any of its bones. All the community of Israel will observe this rite. If a guest is staying with you and wants to celebrate the Passover of Yahweh, we must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part like one born in the land, but no uncircumcised man may participate. The law is the same for the native and the stranger living with you. All the people of Israel did as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron. And that same day Yahweh brought out the sons of Israel and their armies from the land of Egypt. Chapter 13. Offering of the firstborn. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Consecrate to me every firstborn. The first to leave the womb among the sons of Israel, whether of man or beast, is mine. Moses said to the people, Remember the day you came out of Egypt from the house of slavery, for it was by his power that Yahweh brought you out. Because of this you will not eat leavened bread. The day you left was in the month of Abib, when Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey, which he swore to your fathers to give you. You will carry out this ceremony. For 7 days you will eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day you will hold a feast in honor of Yahweh. You will eat unleavened bread for 7 days, and no leavened bread is to be seen among you or anywhere throughout all your territory. On that day, you will tell your son, I do this because of what Yahweh did for me when I came out of Egypt. This ceremony will be for you as a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead, so that Yahweh's law may be ever on your lips. For it was with great power that Yahweh brought you out of Egypt. Because of this, you will observe this ordinance at the appointed time from year to year. When Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanites and gives it to you, as he swore to you and your ancestors, you are to give over to Yahweh all that first opens the womb, and every firstborn of your cattle as well. These firstborn that are males are for Yahweh. Every firstborn donkey will be redeemed by a lamb, and if you do not redeem it, you are to break its neck. Every firstborn among your sons you are to redeem. And in the future your son questions you as to what it means, you will say, Yahweh by his power brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery, as Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go. Yahweh slew every firstborn in Egypt of man and beast. That is why I sacrifice to Yahweh all the males of my cattle that first open the womb, but the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It will be as a sign on your hand and a charm between your eyes, reminding you that the power of Yahweh brought us out of Egypt. The departure. It happened that when Pharaoh sent the people away, God did not lead them through the land of the Philistines, although it was nearer, for God thought that the people might lose heart if they were faced with the prospect of a battle and would return to Egypt. God therefore led the people by the way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea. So the Israelites left Egypt in an orderly manner. Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, for he had made the Israelites swear, saying, God will surely remember you, and then you will carry my bones with you away from here. They moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham, bordering the wilderness by day. Yahweh went before them in a pillar of cloud to guide them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, enabling them to travel day and night. Neither the cloud by day nor the fire by night disappeared from the sight of the people. Chapter 14. The Egyptians pursued the Israelites. Then Yahweh said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, facing Baal-Zepon. You will encamp opposite this place and near the sea. So Pharaoh will think that the people of Israel have lost their way, and the wilderness has closed in on them. Then I will make Pharaoh's heart stubborn, so that he will pursue you, and I will draw glory for myself at the cost of Pharaoh and his family, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. And the Israelites did as they had been instructed. Crossing of the Red Sea. The king of Egypt was told that the people had fled. Then Pharaoh and his ministers changed their minds with regard to the people. What have we done, they said, in allowing Israel to go and be free of our service? Pharaoh prepared his chariot and took his army with him. There were 600 of his best chariots. Indeed, he took all the Egyptian chariots, each one with his warriors. Yahweh had hardened the mind of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who set out in pursuit of the Israelites as they marched forth triumphantly. The Egyptians, all the chariots and horses of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, gave chase and caught up with them, and they had encamped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, facing Baal-Zepon. The Israelites saw the Egyptians marching after them. Pharaoh was drawing near. They were terrified and cried out to Yahweh. Then they said to Moses, were there no tombs in Egypt? Why have you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done by bringing us out of Egypt? Isn't this what we said when we were in Egypt? Let us work for the Egyptians, far better serve Egypt than to die in the desert. Moses said to the people, have no fear. Stay where you are and see the work Yahweh will do to save you today. The Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. Yahweh will fight for you, and all you have to do is to keep still. Yahweh said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. You will raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it to let the Israelites go dry foot through the sea. Dry foot. I will so harden the minds of the Egyptians that they will follow you, and I will have glory at the expense of Pharaoh, his army, his chariots, and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I gain glory for myself at the cost of Pharaoh and his army. The angel of God who had gone ahead of the Israelites now placed himself behind them. The pillar of cloud changed its position from the front to the rear between the camps of the Israelites and the Egyptians. For one army the cloud provided light, for the other darkness, so that throughout the night the armies drew no closer to each other. Moses stretched his hand over the sea, and Yahweh made a strong east and blow all night and dry up the sea. The waters divided, and the sons of Israel went on dry ground through the middle of the sea, with the waters forming a wall to their right and to their left. The Egyptians followed them, and all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots and horsemen, moved forward in the middle of the sea. It happened that in the morning watch, Yahweh in the pillar of cloud and fire looked towards the Egyptian camp and threw it into confusion. He so clogged their chariot wheels that they could hardly move. Then the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for Yahweh is fighting for them against Egypt." Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch your hand over the sea and let the waters come back over the Egyptians, over their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. At daybreak the sea returned to its place as the Egyptians tried to flee. Yahweh swept them into the sea. The waters flowed back and engulfed the chariots and horsemen of the whole army of Pharaoh that had followed Israel into the sea. But one of them escaped. As for the Israelites, they went forward on dry ground in the middle of the sea, the waters forming a wall on their right and their left. On that day, Yahweh delivered Israel from the power of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the seashore. They understood what wonders Yahweh had done for them against Egypt, and the people feared Yahweh. They believed in Yahweh and in Moses, his servant. Commentaries. 1. For centuries, a great part of humanity has lived under oppression. Historians speak little of humanity's life of suffering. Rebelliousness was rare since the great majority were resigned and even came to believe that slavery was a normal situation, but God willed to intervene at least once in a manifest form to liberate the Hebrew people. This was the first step in the history of the people of God. The Bible traces in bold strokes the subhuman conditions of the Hebrews in Egypt. The Egyptian lords were afraid of a people who, according to them, grew irresponsibly fast. They imposed hard work on the Israelites, who had to build and defend a society which did not promote their welfare or recognize their rights. Exploitation and oppression went hand in hand with inhuman labor and political repression enforced by the Egyptian overseers. Finally, an alien authority imposed drastic population control on the Israelites. Situations of oppression can be found in Maccabees, who were Sipa and Puah. These are names of Egyptian women who, because of their compassion for the oppressed people, made mockery of the king's order and refused to execute what their conscience condemned. 2. The liberation of the Hebrew people begins with a simple solitary act, that of a mother risking her life to save her son. Her action is the manifestation of a mother's love. It is the rebellion of a conscience that refuses to obey an inhuman law. It is the act of faith of a mother who anticipates the wonderful future that God opens to a newly born infant, knowing also that children are the future of her people. Isn't this the same way in which mothers today refuse abortion in the name of their conscience enlightened by faith? Historians explain that the details of the story were inspired by the legend of King Zargon, who was saved from drowning when he was a boy. Most probably, nothing was known about Moses' childhood. The story of the basket found among the reeds was a pleasant way of expressing God's providence. Moses would escape from the common destiny of Hebrew children and land in the confined world of those who benefit from culture. The one who was to free the slaves would experience liberty. The slaves did not even know what the word freedom meant. Moses lived a prince's life. Nevertheless, he went to meet his people who lived in poor conditions. He noticed how heavily they were burdened. He did not respond like many culturally privileged who, rather than acting in solidarity with their people, act contrary to their interests. Moses did not deliberately close his eyes like those who deny their humble beginnings or reject solidarity with their companions in order to be admitted to higher circles. Immediately Moses sides with his people on the following day. He discovers another aspect of evil. They are not innocent victims. The oppression they suffer has something to do with the violence, the evil, and the irresponsibility which exists among them. They are not respected by the Egyptians, but neither are they concerned about meriting their respect. This time Moses does not know what to do and prefers to flee. Moses has taken the first step on the way that will lead to the liberation of his people. Likewise, those who are able to share the lot of the privileged but prefer to put themselves out of service of the lowly become, without knowing it, followers of Christ, as Hebrews 11:24-26 says. By faith, Moses refused to be called son of Pharaoh's daughter. He preferred to share ill treatment with the people of God rather than enjoy the passing pleasure of sin. He considered the humiliation of Christ a greater wealth than the wealth of Egypt. Thus we see that the Bible values efforts made to promote human dignity and the efforts of youth workers and all those struggling for development and for more active participation in the building of their future. The liberation God will bring about is at the same time a liberation from structures of oppression and the awakening of each person regarding his or her own sin. As a shepherd in the desert, Moses learns the raw life, poor and free, like that of Abraham, who lives among the Midianites, who are more or less descendants of the father of the believers. Thus, Moses receives from his father-in-law Reuel, also called Jethro, the traditions of Abraham and his faith to the one and only God. They cried to God for help, and from their bondage their cry ascended to God. At times, people do not even have the spirit to hope in God, but though they may have forgotten the promises, God does not forget them. There is such a thing as God's time and also God's delay. Though we can hasten the hour of God, time and the moment belong to Him. God waits. 3 commentaries on chapter 3. God waits several years and then calls Moses when he is already mature. He calls him at a time when Moses has chosen the paths of a father of family and shepherd of sheep. He does this in the desert where Moses has apparently isolated himself from the misfortunes of his people and day after day wastes the opportunity to help them. Thus, many times God waits for a person in this or that desert of his or her life. During those times, apparently so empty, God prepares his servants while their heart and generosity remain intact. The angel of Yahweh appeared to him by means of a flame. The angel of Yahweh, we know this is one way of saying Yahweh God himself. See Visions of Angel, Genesis chapter 16 verse 1, presents himself as a fire that catches the eye but burns whoever approaches it. For centuries, this mountain had been a sacred place, and Moses does what anyone would do when entering a holy place: take off one's sandals so as not to bring before God the dust of ordinary existence. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. The God of Moses' ancestors, called by different names, is only one, and his choice now falls on Moses. I will be with you each time God calls people to a mission. He begins by reassuring them, for they immediately understand that such mission will fully take possession of them. Joshua chapter 1 verse 5, Judges chapter 6 verse 12, Matthew chapter 28 verse 20, Luke chapter 1 verse 28. I am sending you to Pharaoh. This will be the first step of Moses' mission after delivering Israel from Egypt. He will almost by force impose their destiny upon them, which is to be the chosen people of God. God speaks of bringing Israel to the land flowing with milk and honey, the land promised to Abraham. He does not fix the time nor give details, but foretells an event that will prove the authenticity of the mission. Someday, Israel, poor but free, will arrive with Moses at the Mount of to meet God and receive his life-giving words. The divine name. Among other people who have their own ideas about God and who search in darkness for the meaning of their destiny, Israel was to be a people who knew God according to the truth, and who, because of this, would know wherein lies true human greatness. And the revelation of the one and only God is linked to a freeing mission. And there we have the relevant character of biblical revelation. Some years earlier, the Pharaoh Akhenaton wished in his own way to identify the only God. His intuition got bogged down in a problem of worship and had no impact on history. The God of Moses is instead the one holy and just God who desires to be served by free persons. I am who am. There are two ways of translating these words. The first is what we give here. God is the one who alone exists without any limitation. This meaning agrees with the end of verse 14, and at the same time it gives meaning to Yahweh, but it could also be understood as I am who I am. In this case, God does not really refuse to make known his identity to Moses, since he is going to give him his name, but he lets it be understood that no one is able to share the secret of his person. By this name they shall call upon me. It is evident that every name depends on the particular language in which it has its own meaning. God reveals to the Hebrews a name, Yahweh, which in their language is interpreted as He is. If he had spoken to another people, God would have given another name which would have had meaning for them. Yahweh means at the same time He is and He causes to exist. We may understand that God is and causes to exist that which He knows. This name is directly related to the saying by God in verse 14, I am who am and I am. I am, this is the God who lives and sees. Genesis chapter 16 verse 13. When He wants to manifest something of His own mystery, He lets blazing fire. Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 4. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 4. Windstorm and thunder, and the waves of the sea go before Him. All these are nothing more than images that scream like a cloud. God's mystery, which is infinitely more profound, the mystery transcends and reaches beyond not only human insight, but the mind of any human or angelic creature. We all receive existence from God, but God exists in Himself and depends on one and nothing whatsoever. God is one, and none of those who receive existence from Him can add anything to God. Thus then, God is and He causes to exist the one who knows Him. This revelation is critical for understanding the whole Bible and should be remembered then. When believers simply say God is love, God is goodness, and forget that this alone would be false if it were not first affirmed that God is who is. If God were only the Almighty, He would think of prostrating ourselves before Him, set out to make war against idols, and give all importance to laws on prayer, fasting, and the good works He demands. If He were only goodness, we would not understand why He lets us suffer. But He said, I am who am. God is wholly active and perfectly free person, and He calls us to be persons who exist in truth. Hence, God creates a world in which we can act responsibly. God does not impose good. He prepares that through our experience and our errors, we come to discover where the true good is. To worship God does not mean, as some believe, to lie prostrate before Him, but rather to approach Him face to face. God wants to be served by persons who in turn free others in presenting Himself this way. The one true God has said the most essential thing at this early stage of history. He could not speak more precisely and reveal the mystery of the divine persons in the same God. This would be the task of Jesus. Matthew chapter 28 verse 19, John chapter 1 verse 18 to 19. Hence for centuries the Israelites retained the figure of a sovereign God who spoke more the language of obedience. Yahweh or Jehovah in the last centuries. Before Jesus' coming, the Israelites, out of respect, would not pronounce the name of Yahweh. Hence, Yahweh was changed to Yehovah in the Bible, a term which had no meaning nor was pronounced, but on seeing it, the reader knew that he should not say Yahweh but Idona, or Lord. It had been put into the sacred consonants Y, H, WH of Yahweh, the three vowels E, O, A of Idona. Yahweh has met with us, invoking religious motives to offer sacrifices, could not hide the fact that the only objective of the Hebrew slaves was to liberate themselves from the oppression that they suffered. All this happened at a time when there was no social or political problem that was not expressed in religious terms. But today some ask, does the Bible speak to us in the sense of human and political liberation, or does it rather propose a spiritual liberation? In truth, this opposition is artificial. Experience teaches us that in order to save one's neighbor, neither material help nor political change nor prayer is sufficient. What is important is that persons rise to new life. To do this, they themselves must confront and solve the real problems of their common life, material, educational, or political, starting with a more lucid vision of reality as God sees it, and with a more authentic love which is spiritual. I mean to bring you out of all this oppression. God, who exists, is concerned about those who still do not exist in truth. We say that God saves human persons, and so we expose that these are real persons and not undeveloped persons without liberty or responsibility. Salvation is not the washing of souls, but the restoration of the human person in all dimensions, individual, family, and social. When speaking of liberation, the Bible always refers to a total liberation of the human person. We can study Exodus as a life of Moses and see that he was saved, or that he grew as a person and as a believer to the extent that he was taking charge of his material and spiritual tasks as leader, liberator of his people. Commentaries, chapter 4. They will not believe me. It is always difficult for the marginalized to unite and put their confidence in the one who can uplift them, but it will cost Israel even more to follow a path to liberation that is slow and so opposed to human wisdom. Moses usually does not care what people think, but acts with the authority of God. This is why he receives power to perform miracles which prove his authority. All this story is adapted to the world in which Moses lived. We find here the type of portents that were attributed to Egyptian sorcerers. Aaron will speak for you. Perhaps Moses wants to flee from the call of God. Perhaps he feels inferior because he does not have the human qualities that seem essential in a leader. God who calls will provide the necessary means. To understand the role of Aaron in these events, we must remember that the Jewish priests were called the sons of Aaron. They were considered as his descendants. That is why Aaron, who was probably Moses' brother in a way, just as Miriam, sister of Aaron, became in time his blood brother, we find him sharing the authority of Moses and interpreting his words. In reality, all that points out to the priests of Israel and establishes their authority. Moses appears to be gravely sick. His wife thinks it is because he has not been circumcised. Therefore, according to the thinking of the time, she circumcises his son instead of him. It may be noted that chapter 4 verse 19 has been taken textually in Matthew chapter 2 verse 20. The evangelist extends to show that Jesus is the new Moses. 5. Commentary on 5. The word of God is not as easily heard in the offices of the capital as in the desert. Pharaoh's responses and decisions seem to be model which many contemporary directors and administrators imitate. Moses and Aaron received a negative response and later faced the mistrust of their companions. Throughout history, we find the same position from those who did not want to take any initiative to liberate themselves and did not trust in its success. They paid no attention to the leaders working for their good. Martin Luther King, shortly before his death, said with sadness that he was shocked by the indifference of the blacks. he felt alone and struggling for the cause of his own people. God did not lack the means to advance his liberating work, provided that Moses would have the faith and would persevere. Notice the embarrassment of those trusted Israelites who supervised people on behalf of the Egyptian authorities. Commentaries on chapter 6. We said in the beginning of this book that different accounts of the same events were put together. Here begins a later and more summarized story of Moses' call. It gives a list of his ancestors. The Jewish priests attribute to Moses a lifespan of 120 years, that is, of 3 generations, a symbolic and perfect number, 120. 40 years old upon leaving Egypt, 8 years old when he met God, 120 years old at his death. 40 years old upon leaving Egypt, 8 years old when he met God, 120 years old at his death. Commentaries, chapter 7. Here we have the plagues of Egypt. The paragraphs which come from the most ancient story narrate 7 plagues. The other story, the Elohists, gives 9. The third story adds the plague of ulcers. The biblical writers knew that the power of evil also performs miracles to obscure the interventions of God. Note these details. Chapter 7, verse 11 to 12. Chapter 8, verse 3. Chapter 8, verse 14. Chapter 9, verse 10. Chapter 10 describes the reactions of people who recognize the signs of God without arriving at true conversion. Regarding the plagues of misfortunes of Egypt, the modern reader will ask 3 things. Did these stupendous miracles to bring harm upon the Egyptians really happen? If these plagues were merely natural phenomena, should we consider any misfortune as a punishment from God? Were the Egyptian peasants or citizens responsible for the politics of Pharaoh, and did they deserve to be punished? With regard to the first question, we know that for centuries these stories were narrated and amplified by the Israelites. They were meant to show that through these natural misfortunes common in Egypt, the locusts, the Red Nile, frogs, God manifested his will to Pharaoh. With regard to the second, see the commentary on Luke chapter 13, verse 1. God warns us through signs. National leaders, if they would open their eyes to the evils that afflict their country, would realize that injustice will be paid for dearly. With regard to the third question, let us not forget that the sacred authors shared the culture of their times. They were not concerned about whether it was the Egyptians or Pharaoh himself who had sinned in opposing Moses. They only saw that they opposed God's design and must therefore be vanquished. That is what they expressed with the word punished. They were not concerned about the fate of the Egyptian peasants. For them, Egypt represented the unjust power and Pharaoh, the enemy of God. Commentaries on chapter 10. I have made him stubborn. In fact, the text says, I hardened him, or I let his heart harden. But the heart for the Hebrews is the place where decisions are made, as the head is for us. That does not mean to say that God poisoned the heart of Pharaoh. Stubbornly persists that it was God wanted, and it becomes part of his plan to take advantage of the obstacles opposing it. The author surely did not want to confront the problem of human freedom with all the powerful God. Commentaries on 11. All the firstborn in Egypt shall die. The 10th plague nears the angel of Yahweh will make the sons of the Egyptians die, very possibly as in 2nd book of Kings, chapter 19, verse 25. This was some epidemic or plague. At this very time, the meal of the Paschal Lamb will be celebrated. Chapter 12. Commentaries on 12. Let each family take a lamb. The ancestors of the Hebrews, when wandering with their flocks before they stayed in Egypt, celebrated each year the Pasch of the Lamb, the traditional feast of the shepherds. They sacrificed a lamb on the first moon of spring, a critical period for the ewes which had just given birth. The lamb set aside for the feast was kept for several days in the same place where the people were, so that it could be better identified with the family and carry the sins of all its members. Later, the camping tents were sprinkled with its blood to drive away the deadly spirits that threatened people and animals. The sense of the ancient feast has changed. It must be understood that God established the Passover at the time of the Exodus from Egypt. It would always be there to remind Israel of its liberation. Centuries later, when Israel became an agricultural people, it was traditional to celebrate yearly in the spring, a week-long feast during which they are unleavened bread. This feast was of pagan origin, but the Jewish priest, instead of opposing this practice, preferred to combine it with the feast of the Passover and give it a new meaning by relating it to the exit from Egypt. This unleavened bread would call to mind the hurried flight when the Israelites lacked time to leaven their bread. Here we find other more ancient instructions on how to celebrate the Passover, inspiring the firstborn sons of Israel. God again declares his formal opposition to a human sacrifice. Genesis chapter 22. Certainly the firstborn of these people belonged to him, as did the firstborn of the animals and the first fruits of the land. But since God himself had spared the firstborn of Israel when leaving Egypt, even firstborn in Israel would be redeemed rather than emulated. Henceforth, the Israelite families would consider the firstborn as belonging and consecrated to Yahweh. Exodus chapter 13 verse 1. For they had been saved from the plague. According to this law, Jesus, the firstborn of Mary and of God, would be presented in the temple. Luke chapter 2 verse 22. It is a sacrifice to the Passover for Yahweh. This feast, coming from most ancient times, will acquire a new meaning. The blood of the Lamb seals Yahweh's covenant with the people whom he had chosen from among the other peoples. Henceforth, the Passover will be the feast of Israel's independence, and God will allow Jesus to die and rise again in the days of the Passover. The death of Jesus seals God's new covenant with humanity. Luke chapter 22 verse 20. Each one of our masses is rooted in the death and resurrection of Christ, the Lamb of God. Does it help us to enter more deeply into our vocation to be at the service of a world that God continues to free? That takes us far from the idea of an onerous religious obligation to be carried out. People of all descriptions, the wandering Israelites did not look like a holy people. There were those who, for diverse reasons, had decided to live with Moses. The Savior catches all in his net, and only with time, through the trials of the desert, will the good and the bad be separated. 600,000. In reality, those who left with Moses could not have been more than some 200 persons, including wives and children. Let us not forget that these were shepherds who would not survive with less than 10 animals per person. A group of 200 persons required some 2,000 sheep and donkeys. The wells of Sinai and their oases did not permit the transit of more numerous flocks. Maybe these exaggerations originated from a popular version of the events, but otherwise they were intentional. The priests who wrote that paragraph were conscious that the people of Moses initiated the long march of God's people all along the history, and this is the message they wanted to transmit to us. Moses' departure was the beginning of a great adventure. 13. As a sign on your hand, the other peoples use tattoos and religious objects to affirm their religious identity. The Israelites instead would be recognized by the celebration of the day on which God saved them. Chapter 14. On the very night on which they have sacrificed the Passover lamb, the Hebrews depart. The Egyptians pursue and overtake them. When they reach the marshes along the Red Sea, have no fear. God will not abandon those who set forth on the way to freedom. Moses answers as if he has seen the invisible, and his faith puts into motion God's intervention. Yahweh made a strong east wind blow. In fact, the oldest biblical story about this is very imprecise. It does not say that the Israelites crossed the sea, but that they saw their pursuers dead on the seashore. God's intervention was perhaps very moderate, a landslide, a sudden rising of the waters. It was sufficient to save the pursued, but this intervention by providence, as with so many other in history, would not have changed anything had not God's prophet Moses been there to tell the meaning of this event. Yahweh liberates Israel to make them his own people. This is what the later account, printed in smaller letters, wants to teach us when it relates to this crossing of the sea in such a triumphalistic way. Here Moses' group passed in well-ordered file between two walls of water, a band of fugitives absolutely. They were the armies of Yahweh. With them, the God of the poor was beginning to remake the world. The liberation of Israel remains a model for Christian history. Here we find other victories, great and small, that have made possible the progress of God's kingdom and justice. In these cases too, there were groups committed to a liberating task who, without arms, faced Pharaoh and his chariots, his officers, politicians, and bureaucrats. Those who crossed to the other shore are not the same as before. The existence of the people of God has begun. Paul would write about it later. All underwent the baptism of the land and of the sea. That is to say, they safely crossed the deadly waters thanks to God now present in the cloud. The cloud signifies that Yahweh in a mysterious way is in the midst of his own, leading the baptized people. We ought also to cross the sea. Christian communities, recent converts, let us leave behind an existence in which we lived alienated lives, and let us discover a new meaning in life. We cannot do this alone, but together with the community as it matures. Now we go now to chapter 15, but before that, let's have a break. Chapters on Exodus. It's 1:18 in the morning, February 6, 2022. Chapter 15, Exodus. Then Moses and the people sang this song to Yahweh. I will sing to Yahweh, the glorious one. Horse and rider he hath thrown into the sea. Yahweh is my strength and my song, and he is my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him. The God of my father, I will extol him. Yahweh is a warrior. Yahweh is his name. The chariots of Pharaoh and his army he has hurled into the sea. His chosen officers were drowned in the Red Sea. The deep covers them. They went down like a stone. Your hand, O Yahweh, glorious and powerful. Your right hand, O Yahweh, shatters the enemy. In the splendor of your majesty, you crush your foes. You send forth your fury, which devours them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging waters stood firm in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will give chase and overtake. I will divide the spoil and make a feast of it. I shall draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. A breath of yours, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who among the gods is like you, Yahweh? Who is like you, majestic in holiness? Awesome in power, doing wonders. You stretch out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. In unfailing love, you guided the people you redeemed. In strength, you led them to your holy house. Hearing this, the nations tremble. Anguish grips the people of Philistia. The chieftains of Edom are dismayed. The leaders of Moab are seized with trembling. The people of Canaan will melt away. Terror and dread fall upon them. Your powerful arm leaves them still as stone until your people pass by, O Yahweh. Till the people you have purchased pass by, you will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place you chose to dwell in, O Yahweh. the sanctuary prepared by your hands. Yahweh will reign forever. When Pharaoh's chariots, horses, and horsemen went into the sea, Yahweh brought back the waters over them, while the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea. Then Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her, dancing and playing tambourines. Miriam sang to them, "Sing to Yahweh the glorious one, horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." Through the desert, Moses then led Israel from the Red Sea towards the wilderness of Shur. They walked in the desert for 3 days without finding water. They reached Mara, but could not drink the water there as it was bitter. That is why the place is called Mara. The people grumbled against Moses and said, "What shall we drink?" Moses then cried out to Yahweh, who showed him a piece of wood, and when he threw it in the water became sweet. There Yahweh gave the people statutes and laws. There he tested them and said, "If you listen carefully to the voice of Yahweh your God, and if you do what is right in his eyes, if you obey his commands and statutes, I will not inflict on you and any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am Yahweh, the one who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there are 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they pitched their camp beside the water. The manna, chapter 16. The Israelites left Elim, and the entire community reached the desert of Sin between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after leaving Egypt. In the desert, the whole community of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of Yahweh in Egypt, when we sat down to cauldrons of meat and ate all the bread we wanted, whereas you have brought us to this desert to let the whole assembly die of starvation." Yahweh then said to Moses, "Now I am going to rain down bread from heaven for you." Rain down bread. Each day the people are to gather what is needed for their living. In this way I will test them to see if they will follow my teaching or not. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they have brought in, they will find that there is twice as much as they gather each day. Then Moses and Aaron said to the people of Israel in the evening, "You will know that it was Yahweh who brought you out of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of Yahweh, for he has heard your grumbling against him. Because who are we that you should grumble against us? In the evening Yahweh will give you meat to eat, and in the morning bread to satisfy your hunger. Because Yahweh heard your grumbling, you are not grumbling against us, but against Yahweh. For who are we?" Then Moses directed Aaron to say to the whole community of Israel, "Draw near to Yahweh, for he has heard your complaints." It happened that as Aaron was speaking to the full assembly of Israel, they turned towards the desert and saw the glory of Yahweh in the midst of the cloud. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of Israel. Speak to them and say, between the 2 evenings you will eat meat, and in the morning you will have bread to your heart's content. Then you shall know that I am Yahweh your God." In the evening quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning dew had fallen around the camp. When the dew lifted, there was on the surface of the desert a thin crust like hoar frost. The people of Israel, upon seeing it, said to one another, "What is it?" For they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, "It is the bread that Yahweh has given you to eat." This is what Yahweh commanded. Gather it according to the amount each one eats, about 4 liters apiece, and according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent. This is what the people of Israel did. They gathered it, some more, other less, but when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered more didn't want too much, while those who gathered less didn't have too little. Each one had as much as he needed. "Give us our daily bread." And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it till the morning." But they did not listen to Moses, and some of them left it till morning. And it bred worms and became foul, and Moses was angry with them. Every morning, each one gathered as much as he could eat, and when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered the double amount of bread, 2 omers each, and the leader of the people came to tell Moses. He said to them, "This is what Yahweh commanded. Tomorrow you shall rest, for that day is a rest, or Sabbath, sacred to Yahweh. Bake today what you have to bake, and boil what you have to boil, and you shall put aside what is left over to be kept till the next day." So they put aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and its smell was not foul, and it was free of maggots. And Moses said, "Eat it today, for this is a day of rest, or Sabbath, in honor of Yahweh. Today you will not find it in the fields. For 6 days you will gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be none." Some of the people went out on the seventh day, but found none. Then Yahweh said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to obey my commands and my laws? Yahweh has given you this resting day. That is why on the sixth day he gave you bread for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the seventh day." And so the people rested on the seventh day. The people of Israel called this food manna. It was white like coriander seed, and it toasted like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, "This is what Yahweh commanded. Take a measure of manna and keep it for future generations, to let them see the bread I gave you to eat in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and fill it with a measure of manna, and place it before Yahweh for your descendants. According to Aaron, put a full measure of manna in the jar as Yahweh had commanded Moses, and place it for safekeeping in the Ark of the Covenant." The people of Israel ate the manna until they came to an inhabited land. They ate it for 40 years, up to the time they reached the border of Canaan. The container used for the measurement of manna was of 2 liters. Chapter 17. Water from the rock. The whole community of the people of Israel moved on from the desert of Sin, going from place to place, as Yahweh commanded, and encamped at Rephidim. But there was no water to drink. The people complained to Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." But Moses replied, "Why do you find fault with me? Why do you put Yahweh to the test?" But the people thirsted for water and grumbled against Moses. "Why did you make us leave Egypt to have us die of thirst with our children and our cattle?" So Moses cried to Yahweh, "What shall I do with the people? They are almost ready to stone me." Yahweh said to Moses, "Go ahead of the people and take with you the elders of Israel. Take with you the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you on the rock of Horeb. You will strike the rock, and water will flow from it, and the people will drink." Moses did this in the presence of the elders of Israel. The place was called Massa and Meribah, because of the complaints of the Israelites who tested Yahweh, saying, "Is Yahweh with us or not?" Victory over Amalek. When the Israelites were at Rephidim, the Amalekites came and attacked them. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites in the morning. As for me, I will stand with God's staff in my hand at the top of the hill." Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had directed, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. It happened that when Moses raised his hands, the Israelites would win, but when he lowered them, the Amalekites would have the advantage. As Moses' arms grew weary, they placed a stone for him to sit on, while Aaron and Hur on either side held up his arms, which remained steadily raised until sunset. For his part, Joshua mowed down Amalek and his people with a sword. Yahweh then instructed Moses, "Write this in a book as something to be remembered, and make it known in the hearing of Joshua that I will wipe out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." After that, Moses built an altar and called it "Yahweh is my banner." For he said, "Raise up the standard of Yahweh. Yahweh is at war with Amalekites from generation to generation." Chapter 18. Meeting with Jethro. Jethro, the priest of Midian, father-in-law of Moses, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, when Yahweh brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away Zipporah, his wife, Jethro, his father-in-law, received her and her 2 sons. The first Moses had called Gershom to remember that he had been a guest in a foreign land, and the other Eliezer, for he said, "The God of my father came to my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh." So Jethro came with Moses' wife and sons to the desert where the people had encamped at the mountain of God. Moses was told, "Your father-in-law Jethro is here. He has come with your wife and her 2 sons." So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and bowing low before him, he kissed him, and when each had inquired about the other's health, they entered the tent. Moses then told his father-in-law in all that Yahweh had done to Pharaoh and Egypt for the sake of Israel, and all the difficulties they had met with on the way, and how Yahweh had saved them. Jethro rejoiced at all Yahweh's goodness to Israel in freeing them from the power of Egypt, and he said, "Blessed be Yahweh who has delivered you from the power of Egypt and Pharaoh, and has rescued the people from the grip of Egypt. I know now that Yahweh is greater than all the gods, for he delivered his people when they were being oppressed." Then Jethro brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to share this meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. Appointment of judges. The next day, Moses took his seat to administer justice for the people who stood around him from morning till night. His father-in-law, seeing all the work of Moses for the people, said to him, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and judge while all the people stand around you from morning till night?" Moses answered, "It is the people who come to me to know God's will. When there is a dispute, they bring it to me to decide between the 2 parties, and I teach them God's decrees and laws." Jethro replied, "What you are doing is not good. You and your people will wear yourselves out, for the work is too heavy, and you cannot do it alone. Now listen to the advice I am going to give you, and God be with you. You will be the people's representative before God and bring their cases to Him. You will teach them the statutes and laws and the way they must live and what they must do. But choose among the people capable, God-fearing men of truth who hate a bribe, and appoint them as leaders for groups of 1,000, 150, and 10. They will administer justice at all times, bringing to your attention only those cases of major importance, while they deal with all those of lesser importance. That will ease your burden, since they will be sharing it with you. If you do this, God will guide you, and you will be able to cope with this duty, and all these people will reach their place in peace." Moses followed his father-in-law's advice and did as he said. He chose capable men from among the Israelites and placed them as leaders for groups of 1,000, 150, and 10. They administered justice at all times, bringing difficult cases to Moses, but judging all other cases themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law return to his own country. Chapter 19. Preparing for the covenant. Exactly 2 months after the Israelites had left Egypt, they arrived at the wilderness of Sinai. They arrived there coming from Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai. The Israelites camped there in front of the mountain, but Moses went up to God, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you are to say and to explain to the Israelites. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you listen to me and keep my covenant, you shall be my very own possession among all the nations. For all the earth is mine, but you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And he added, this is what you are to say to the people of Israel. So Moses went and summoned all the elders of the people and related to them all that Yahweh had commanded him to say. All the people responded with one voice, all that Yahweh has said, we will do. Moses then brought back to Yahweh the people's response. Yahweh spoke to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people may hear me speaking with you and trust you always. Then Moses related to Yahweh what the people had said. Again Yahweh spoke to Moses, go to the people and have them sanctified today and tomorrow. Let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day Yahweh will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You will fix a limit for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up to the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain will die. No hand shall touch him, but he will be stoned or shot down by arrows. Be it man or beast, he shall not live. Only when the ram's horn sounds may some of them go up to the mountain. Moses came down from the mountain to the people and purified them, and they washed their garments. He then said to the people, be ready in 3 days and abstain from sexual relations. On the morning of the third day there was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast was heard. All the people in the camp trembled. Moses then made the people leave the camp to meet God and stand at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was completely covered in smoke because Yahweh had come down in fire, and the smoke rose as from a furnace. The whole mountain shook violently, while the blast of the trumpet became louder and louder. Moses spoke, and God replied in thunder. When Yahweh had come down to the summit of Mount Sinai, God called Moses, who went to the summit, where Yahweh said to him, go down and give this warning to the people, lest they rush to see Yahweh and many of them perish. Even the priests who come near Yahweh must purify themselves, lest Yahweh break out against them. Moses answered Yahweh, the people cannot ascend Mount Sinai because you yourself ordered us to put limits around the mountain and to set it apart as holy. Yahweh replied, go down and bring up Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and said to them. Chapter 20, the dialogue. God spoke all these words. He said, I am Yahweh, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Do not have other gods before me. Do not make yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything in heaven or on the earth, beneath or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God. For the sin of the fathers, when they rebel against me, I punish the sons, the grandsons, and the great-grandsons. But I show steadfast love until the 1,000th generation for those who love me and keep my commandments. Do not take the name of Yahweh your God in vain, for Yahweh will not leave unpunished anyone who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. For 6 days you will labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath for Yahweh your God. Do not work that day, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servants, men or women, nor your animals, nor the stranger who is staying with you. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, but on the 7th day he rested. That is why Yahweh has blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that you may have a long life in the land that Yahweh has given you. Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false witness against your neighbor, do not covet your neighbor's house, do not covet your neighbor's wife or his servant, man or woman, or his ox or his donkey, or anything that is his. In the meantime, all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning and heard the blast of the trumpet and saw the mountain smoking. They trembled with fear and kept at a distance. Then they said to Moses, You yourself speak to us, and he shall listen, but do not have God speak to us, lest we die. Moses answered the people, Do not be afraid, for God has come to test you, so that the fear of God may be with you, and that you may not sin again. So the people kept a distance while Moses went forward to the cloud where God was. The Code of the Covenant. Yahweh spoke to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel. You have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from the heavens. Do not make any gods of silver or gold to stand beside me. For me, you are to make an altar of earth, and on it you will sacrifice burnt offerings and peace offerings. Your sheep and your cattle, in every place where you come to remember my name, I will come to you and bless you. If you build an altar of stone, do not make it of cut stones, for you will defile it by using tools on it, and you will not ascend my altar on steps, lest you expose your nakedness on it. Chapter 21. These are the laws you are to set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he will serve you for 6 years, and in the 7th year he shall go free, with nothing to pay. If he came alone, he will live alone. If he was married, his wife will live with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears his sons or daughters, the wife and her children belong to his master. He will live alone. But if the slave says, I love my wife, my master, and my children, I will not go free, his master shall bring him to God. He will take him to the door or the doorpost. Then his master will pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him for life. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she is not to go free as men slaves do. If she does not please the master who intended her for himself, he shall let another redeem her. He is not to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he intends her for his son, he will deal with her according to the rights of daughters. If he takes another for himself, he will not diminish her food, her clothing, or marital rights. If he feels her in respect of these 3 rights, she is to go free without any payment of money. The man who strikes another and so causes his death shall die. If he did not want to kill him, but as it were, let it happen, then I will give you a place where he may find refuge. Instead, if a man willfully attacks another to kill him treacherously, you will take him away even from my altar and put him to death. Whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death. Another who kidnaps another and either sells him or is found holding him captive shall be put to death. He who curses his father or mother shall be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes another with a stone or with his fist, so that the man is confined to bed, but after that he gets up and walks about with the help of a stick, the man who struck the blow will not be held as a criminal. He will, however, pay the injured man for loss of time and see that he is completely healed. When a man strikes his slave or his servant with a rod and the man dies at his hand, he shall be punished, but if the slave survives for a day or 2, he will not be penalized, since the slave is property. If men are fighting and a pregnant woman is hit so that the child is born prematurely, but she is not injured, the one who hurt her will pay the fine demanded by her husband and allowed by the court. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and the eye is lost, he will let the slave go free in compensation for the eye. Or if he knocks out a tooth, he will likewise give the slave his freedom. When an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox will be stoned and its flesh will not be eaten, but the owner of the ox will not be punished. If the ox had gored someone in the past and its owner had been warned but had not kept it fenced in, and if later it kills a man or woman, the ox will be stoned and its owner put to death. If the owner, however, is allowed to pay a fine to save his life, he must pay all that is demanded. If the ox gores a boy or a girl, the same law applies. If the ox gores a man or a woman's slave, the owner of the slave shall be paid 30 pieces of silver, and the ox will be stoned. When a man leaves a pit uncovered, or when he digs a pit and leaves it open, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit will make compensation to the owner of the animal by paying him money, but he may keep the dead animal. When a man's ox injures the ox of his neighbor and it dies, they will sell the live ox and share both the money and the meat of the dead animal. Or if it is known that the ox has been in the habit of goring and its owner has not kept it in, he must make good the loss by giving his neighbor a live ox, but the dead ox will be his. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and either slaughters or sells it, he must pay five oxen for the ox, 4 sheep for the sheep. Chapter 22. If a thief is caught breaking into a house and receives a mortal blow, the man who struck him will not be guilty of his death, but if it happened after dawn, he will be guilty of murder. The thief must make full restitution. If he cannot do this, he must be sold for what he has stolen. If what has been stolen is found alive in his possession, be it ox, donkey, or sheep, he must pay double. If a man puts his animals to graze and lets them stray and feed in another man's field or vineyard, he must make good the loss with the best of his own crop and the best of his vineyard. When a fire breaks out and spreads through the thorn bushes and burns the grain that is either stacked or growing there, the man who started the fire must pay for the damage. If a man gives money or goods to another to keep for him, and they are stolen, the thief, if he is found, shall pay back double. Should the thief not be found, the man who owns the house must swear before the judges that he has not stolen the other man's property. Whenever there is a failure of trust, whether it concerns an ox, donkey, sheep, clothing, or any other lost object, the person the judges find guilty shall pay double to the other. If a man entrusts to his neighbor his donkey, cow, sheep, or other animal, and the animal dies or is injured or is carried off without being seen, an oath before Yahweh shall prove that the man has not stolen the other's property. The owner of the animal shall accept the oath, and the other shall not make restitution. But if the animal has been stolen from him, restitution shall be made. If the animal was killed by wild beasts, the man must bring the remains as evidence, but shall not pay anything. When a man borrows an animal from his neighbor and the animal is injured or dies when the owner is not present, the man who borrowed must pay for it. But if the owner is present, the borrower need not repay. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, shall pay the bride price and marry her. If her father refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to that of a virgin given in marriage. You shall not allow a sorceress to live. Whoever has sexual relations with a beast shall die. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than Yahweh shall die. You shall not wrong or oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not harm the widow or the orphan. If you do harm them, and they cry out to me, I will hear them, and my anger will blaze, and I will kill you with the sword, and your own wives will be widows, and your own children orphans. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor, do not act like a money lender, and do not charge him interest. If ever you take a person's cloak as a pledge, you must give it back to him by sunset, for it is all the covering he has for his body. In what else will he sleep? And when he cries to me, I will hear him, for I am full of pity. Do not revile God or curse a ruler of your people. Do not delay in giving me my share of your wheat and your wine. You shall give to me the firstborn of your sons. It shall be the same for your cattle and sheep. The firstborn shall say that with its mother for 7 days. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be consecrated to my service. Do not eat flesh that has been torn by wild animals. Let it be given to the dogs. Chapter 23. Do not make false statements, and do not join hands with the wicked by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the majority when they do evil, or when they pervert justice in a lawsuit. Do not be partial, not even to the poor. If you see your enemy's ox or donkey going astray, take it back to him. When you see the donkey or a man who hates you falling under its load, do not pass by but help him. Do not deny justice to any of your poor in a lawsuit. Keep away from lies. Do not slay the innocent or the just, for I will not forgive the wicked. And do not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the clear-sighted and perverts the sentence of the just. Do not oppress a stranger. You know what it is to be a stranger, for that is what you were in the land of Egypt. For 6 years you will sow your fields and reap their produce, but in the 7th you will let the land rest and they lie fallow. The poor may eat what it produces, and what they leave the wild animals will eat. It will be the same for your vineyard and your olive grove. For 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, so that your ox and your donkey may also rest, and the son of your slave girl and the stranger as well may have a breathing space. Pay attention to all that I tell you, and do not call upon the other gods. Don't let their names be heard on your lips. 3 times each year you shall celebrate a feast in my honor. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, as I commanded you, and eat unleavened bread for 7 days, at the appointed time in the month of Abib. For it was then that you left Egypt, and do not come to me empty-handed. You shall keep the feast of the harvest with the feast of the first harvest of what you sowed in your fields. Then the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the fruit of your labor in the fields. 3 times during the year all your men shall present themselves before Yahweh. Do not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, or let the fat of my feast remain until morning. The first of the first fruits of your soil you will bring to the house of Yahweh your God. Do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. See, I am sending an angel before you to keep you safe on the way and bring you to the place I have made ready. Be on your guard in his presence and listen to him. Do not resist him, for he will not pardon your wrongdoing, for my name is in him. If you listen to him and do what I say, I will be enemy to your enemies and the opponent of your opponents. My angel will go before you and bring you to the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. All these I will destroy. You shall not bow down before their gods or serve them, or act according to their ways. Rather, you will destroy them utterly and smash their sacred stones. If you serve Yahweh your God, he will bless your bread and your water, and I will keep sickness away from you. No woman among you will miscarry or be barren. I will fulfill the number of your days. Now I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion all the people you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn and flee before you. I will send hornets ahead of you to drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, the Hittites. I will not drive them out in a single year, lest the land become a desert and the wild beasts increase and molest you. I will drive them out before you little by little until your number increase and you are able to take possession of the land. I will fix your boundaries from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates, for I will deliver into your power the inhabitants of the land, and I will drive them out before you. You shall make no treaty with them or with their gods. They shall not live in your country, lest they lead you to sin against me and to serve their gods that would surely be as their word. Chapter 24. Then he said to Moses, Go up to Yahweh, you, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, with 70 of the elders of Israel, and let them worship from a distance. Moses alone shall go forward to Yahweh, but not the others, nor shall the people go up with him. Conclusion of the covenant. Moses came and told the people all the words of Yahweh and all his laws. The people replied with one voice, "Everything that Yahweh has said we shall do." Moses wrote down all the words of Yahweh, then rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 raised stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. He then sent young men from among the sons of Israel to offer burnt offerings and sacrifice bullocks as peace offerings to Yahweh. And Moses took half the blood and put it in basins, and with the other half of the blood he sprinkled the altar. He then took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. They said, "All that Yahweh said he shall do and obey." Moses, "We shall do and obey." Moses then took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, saying, "Here is the blood of the covenant that Yahweh has made with you in accordance with all these words." And Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel. They saw the God of Israel, and under his feet there was what seemed like a pavement of sapphire, clear as the sky itself, and he did not let his hand overpower these chosen men from among the sons of Israel. They looked on God and ate and drank. Moses is given the law. Yahweh said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay there. I will give you the slabs of stone, the teaching and commandment which I have written for their instruction." So Moses arose with his servant Joshua, and before going up the mountain of God, Moses said to the elders, "Remain here until we come back to you. Aaron and Hur are with you. Let whoever has a dispute to settle go to them." When Moses went up the mountain, a cloud covered it. The glory of Yahweh rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the seventh day he called Moses from within the cloud. The glory of Yahweh appeared like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. So it appeared to the Israelites. And Moses entered the cloud and went up the mountain. Moses stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Commentaries. 15. The first canticle of Moses is a shout of joyful thanksgiving. It is at the same time a profession of faith. The psalmist says, "Happy are the people who know how to praise. The liberated people have no reason." The psalmist says, "Happy are the people who know how to praise. The liberated people had no reason to glory in themselves at this victory which belonged to God and to Moses. The man of faith, it is proper for them only to give thanks to God." Revelation will recall this canticle, Revelation chapter 15 verse 3, in the vision of the elect and martyrs of Christ, saved from their weakness and crowned with glory. Ancient religions and also modern people celebrate feasts in accordance with the rhythm of nature, feasts of the moon, of summer, of rain, of birth. On the other hand, the feasts in the Bible celebrate the marvels which God did to save them. If it is good to praise God for the wonders of nature, even more should we recognize Him in the events of history. Let us give thanks to God before anything else for the great and small events that show His reign coming. The Israelites definitely left behind the most brilliant and impressive civilization of their times, with its products, irrigation camps, and prestigious culture. Had they not left, they would have disappeared as a people. But now, like any nation or social class that achieves its independence, they have to become responsible for their own destiny. Moses knows that freedom is not a continual joy. This is but the beginning of a difficult way involving sacrifice. On this way, however, God manifests His providence and allows us to walk with confidence, self-confidence. Unexpected wonders may happen, but God is not concerned with multiplying miracles in order to better our situation. The fugitives have reason to be worried. They are threatened by hunger, thirst, and the inhabitants of the desert. In the following pages, the author graphically describes the dangers and recalls certain interventions by providence, but he relates the story with much liberty, adapting these teachings to his contemporaries who were continually tempted by the easy life, who were avaricious and attracted by the promises of foreign countries in which they would have lost their own identity and mission. I am Yahweh, the one who heals you. Each God has his specialty, but Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, is not only liberator, he also knows our infirmities, and his word is powerful for healing and for keeping us healthy. 16. The whole community of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Later on, we shall again meet the grumblers who are afraid to grumble too publicly. They are not satisfied but have no suggestions to make. They criticize the believers, but in fact they just do not want problems. Yahweh will give you meat. God provided food for his people just when they lacked everything. Numerous flocks of birds, tired from a long flight, fell at the side of the encampment. Other unexpected food, the manna, was also found. This manna was probably the resin that at times seeps out abundantly from the brambles of the desert. In a most desperate moment, this help was for Israel, the proof that God had not abandoned them. This event is also related in Numbers 11:4. By this we understand that our daily bread is a gift of God. When he invites us to take a difficult path, he is committed to helping us and first giving us the bread we need. With time, the narration of this event was amplified. Some biblical texts seem to mean that God sent the manna during 40 years. Exodus chapter 16, verse 35, Joshua chapter 5, verse 12, Psalm chapter 78, verse 24, Wisdom chapter 16, verse 20. This gift of the bread which came from heaven is mentioned in two different commentaries in later pages of the Bible. Deuteronomy 8:3, chapter 8, verse 3, I gave you manna to eat, to show you that man does not live on bread alone, but that every word that comes from the mouth of God is life for man. See commentary on Mark chapter 6, verse 35. Later in the Gospel, the man is an image of the true bread from heaven, Christ, which is given as food of life in the Eucharist. See commentaries on John chapter 6.